She went to pick up her cousin, but drove away with a millionaire instead. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's video, I need your help. We've noticed that the channel is losing traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can help us. It's quick, free, and allows us to continue bringing you great content. Your support means everything. Let's keep this channel growing collectively. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to the story. The arrival terminal buzzed with chatter, suitcase wheels clicking against the polished floor, and the faint smell of coffee drifting from the cafe nearby. Claire Johnson held a white cardboard sign in both hands that read, Mr. Reed. She was nervous, biting her lip as she scanned the crowd. Her cousin Jenna was supposed to do this pickup, a private client from overseas, but Jenna had caught the flu and begged Claire to fill in. Claire needed the extra cash, so she agreed, thinking it would be a simple favor. Flights were delayed, people rushed in every direction, and an announcement echoed through the speakers. Claire adjusted her ponytail and checked her phone again. Gate 12. International arrivals. Okay, she whispered. Then she saw him. A tall man in a charcoal suit, dark hair perfectly styled, walked through the sliding doors pulling a sleek black suitcase. His eyes were sharp, the kind that noticed everything. He spotted her sign, paused, and started walking toward her. Claire's heart jumped. She forced a polite smile and lifted the sign higher. Mr. Reed? He stopped in front of her, studying her face for a brief second, then gave a courteous nod. Yes, that is me. Relieved, she extended her hand. Nice to meet you, sir. I am here to drive you to the hotel. Thank you, he said simply, his voice low and calm. He followed her toward the parking garage, his expensive shoes echoing on the tile. As they reached the car, rain began to fall lightly over the lot. She opened the back door, and he slid in, setting his suitcase neatly beside him. Claire got behind the wheel, glancing at him through the rearview mirror. Long flight? She asked. 10 hours, he replied, loosening his tie. But I have had worse. She laughed softly. I cannot imagine. I get tired just sitting through morning traffic. He looked at her reflection, a faint smile tugging at his lips. You are not from the company, are you? Her cheeks warmed. Well, I am helping my cousin out. She usually handles these things. I just drive. Ah, he said, leaning back. A favor, then. Something like that. The ride fell into a comfortable silence, broken only by the sound of rain tapping against the windshield. The city lights blurred through the glass as they crossed the bridge into downtown. Claire focused on the road, her hands steady on the wheel, unaware that every now and then, his gaze drifted toward her, curious, amused, maybe even intrigued. At a red light, she tried to make conversation again. So, do you visit the city often? Not often, he said, glancing outside. But I have some business to handle this week. That sounds important. He chuckled softly. It always is. The light turned green, and she drove on, completely unaware that the man sitting behind her, quiet, observant, and impossibly composed, was not just any client. He was Alexander Reed, the billionaire CEO of Aurian Group, one of the most powerful tech firms in the country. And somewhere between the airport runway and the city skyline, the man she picked up by mistake was already thinking that maybe fate had arranged the wrong ride for all the right reasons. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the blinds of Claire's small apartment. The sound of traffic outside blended with the faint hum of her coffee maker. She sat at the tiny kitchen table, scrolling through her phone while replaying last night's strange encounter. It had been just another side job, a favor for her cousin, yet the man she had picked up did not leave her mind. His calm voice, the way he watched the rain instead of his phone, the quiet warmth behind those sharp eyes. There was something about him that felt different. Still, Claire shook off the thought. She had bills to pay, a landlord waiting for rent, and her mother's hospital medications to refill by Friday. The idea of some mysterious passenger thinking about her was almost laughable. She poured coffee into a chipped mug, took a sip, and whispered to herself, back to real life. Her phone buzzed a message from her boss at the cafe. Morning rush. We are short-staffed. Can you cover the register? She sighed, grabbed her jacket, and headed out the door. The cafe sat on the corner of 5th and Main, the kind of place where regulars ordered without looking at the menu. Claire tied her apron, tucked her hair behind her ear, and forced a smile as the bell over the door kept ringing. "Good morning. What can I get started for you?" She greeted customers one after another, her voice steady despite her exhaustion. By noon, the line stretched to the door. The espresso machine hissed like it was breathing fire, and the smell of roasted beans filled the air. As Claire wiped down the counter, the bell chimed again. She looked up and froze. The man from last night stood in line, wearing the same quiet confidence but in a casual navy sweater instead of a suit. His presence seemed to draw every eye in the room without him even trying. Their gazes met, and for a second, Claire forgot how to breathe. He smiled faintly, a hint of amusement flickering in his eyes. When he reached the counter, he set his phone down and said, "Large black coffee, no sugar." Her hands trembled slightly as she rang it up. "That will be $3.50. He handed her a bill, then paused. "Claire, right?" She blinked. "You remembered my name?" "I do not forget good company," he said softly. "I hope I did not cause trouble last night." "That percent matter, men." She shook her head quickly. "No, no trouble at all. Just a mix-up. My cousin was supposed to pick you up, but her flight info was wrong. I am sorry about that." He waved it off. "No harm done." The wrong pickup turned out surprisingly pleasant. Claire felt her cheeks warm as she slid his coffee across the counter. "Well, glad I did not completely ruin your schedule." He chuckled quietly. "Actually, you saved it. I had not laughed in a while before yesterday." The bell rang again behind him, and a group of customers rushed in. Claire turned to help them, and when she looked back, he was gone, leaving only a folded receipt under his cup. She opened it. On the back, written in clean handwriting, were 5 words. "Next time, coffee is on me." Her heart skipped. Later that evening, Claire returned home, exhausted but strangely lighthearted. She set the note on her desk beside her worn-out sketchbook, the one she used to design small jewelry pieces she hoped to sell online someday. Her mother's framed photo sat beside it, smiling, strong, reminding her to keep going. Claire picked up the bracelet she always wore, a silver charm engraved with the words, "Be kind anyway." She smiled to herself. Maybe kindness really did find its way back. Outside, the city lights shimmered against the window pane. Somewhere downtown, Alexander Reed sat in his office, the same folded note in his pocket, thinking about the girl who had no idea who he truly was. For the first time in a long while, he found himself smiling at nothing. And, far across the city, Claire whispered a small laugh, unaware that fate had just taken its first real step. 2 days later, rain returned to the city. The streets shimmered under the glow of streetlights as Claire locked the cafe door after closing. Her hands ached from washing dishes, and the smell of espresso clung to her sweater. She pulled her jacket tighter and started walking toward the bus stop. As she waited under the awning, a black car pulled up beside the curb. The window rolled down, and a familiar voice called, "Need a ride, Claire?" She turned, startled. Alexander sat behind the wheel, dressed down in a gray coat and jeans, his smile calm but genuine. "Mr. Reed?" she asked, blinking. "What are you doing here?" He shrugged lightly. "Passing by. You look like you could use a lift." Claire hesitated. "You really do not have to." "I insist," he said. "It is late. Let me make it up to you for that airport confusion." After a pause, she nodded and opened the passenger door. The interior smelled faintly of cedar and rain. She buckled her seatbelt as he pulled into traffic. For a while, neither spoke. The windshield wipers kept rhythm with the rain, and the hum of the engine filled the silence. Finally, Alexander said quietly, "You work very hard." Claire smiled faintly. "Hard work is the only thing that pays the bills. Dreams are expensive." He glanced at her. "What is your dream?" She hesitated. "I used to design jewelry. Nothing big, just sketches. My mom said I had an eye for detail, but that was before she got sick." His expression softened. "Is she doing better?" "She has her good days," Claire said, looking out the window. "I just try to keep her comfortable." Alexander nodded slowly. "That is admirable." She laughed softly. "No, it is just life." When he dropped her at her apartment, she thanked him and reached for the door handle. He stopped her gently. "Claire, may I ask something?" She turned. "Sure." He smiled, almost shy. "Would you let me buy you dinner sometime? As friends, nothing complicated." She hesitated, caught off guard by the sincerity in his tone. "Dinner?" "Yes," he said. "No contracts, no mix-ups, just a meal. Her lips curved. You make it sound like a business proposal. He laughed quietly. Force of habit. Claire looked at him for a moment, then nodded. All right. One dinner. Tomorrow night? Tomorrow night, she confirmed. As she stepped out into the drizzle, he watched her walk toward the building, her figure small but steady under the flickering light. Something about her reminded him of everything simple he had forgotten. Patience, honesty, warmth. When she turned back at the door, she saw him still parked there, headlights glowing softly through the rain. She gave a small wave, and he lifted his hand in return before driving off into the night. For the first time in a long while, Claire felt seen not as someone struggling to make ends meet, but as herself. And as the rain washed over the quiet street, both of them knew that this was no longer just a coincidence. It was the beginning of something neither had planned, but both somehow needed. The next evening, the city glowed under a pale sunset when Claire arrived at the small Italian restaurant Alexander had chosen. It was elegant but quiet, the kind of place where the soft clinking of glasses filled the air instead of loud chatter. She smoothed the front of her simple blue dress, feeling slightly out of place among the suits and silk dresses. When she walked in, Alexander was already there, standing to greet her. He looked different without the distance of the car window or the weight of a suit, more human, less untouchable. You made it, he said warmly, pulling out her chair. I almost did not, she replied with a nervous smile. I was going to back out at the last minute. Why? Because men who drive luxury cars do not usually take girls like me to dinner. He laughed softly. Maybe that is their mistake. She could not help but laugh too. For the first time, she noticed how easy it was to talk to him. The waiter brought bread and water, and soon they were trading stories. Her childhood memories of sketching jewelry by candlelight during power outages. His of learning business from his father's warehouse before life became boardrooms and contracts. What about you? She asked. You said you travel for work. What kind of business are you in? Alexander paused for a heartbeat, choosing his words carefully. Logistics, he said finally. Mostly management and tech. It sounds more exciting than it is. It is half of the processor, the liveling and mines. Claire nodded. Still, you must be good at it. He smiled faintly, not ready to reveal that management meant leading thousands of employees and running a global corporation. For tonight, he just wanted to be a man eating dinner with someone who saw him for who he was, not for what he owned. As the night went on, they talked about everything and nothing. Claire's laugh came easily, and Alexander found himself leaning closer without realizing it. When dessert arrived, he said quietly, You know, I cannot remember the last time I enjoyed a meal this much. Because of the pasta or the company? She teased. Both, he said with a grin. They walked out together after dinner. The air was cool, carrying the scent of rain on the pavement. Alexander offered her his coat, and though she protested at first, he draped it gently over her shoulders. Thank you, she said softly. For what? In the lot be gather we want. For treating me like an equal, she replied. Most people look at me and see someone who does not belong in places like this. He met her eyes, steady and sincere. Then they are not looking closely enough. For a long moment, neither of them moved. The streetlights flickered above them, and the hum of passing cars filled the silence. Finally, Claire smiled and handed his coat back. Good night, Alexander. He nodded, his voice low. Good night, Claire. As she walked away, he watched her disappear around the corner, feeling something unfamiliar settle in his chest. A quiet ache that was not loneliness anymore. It was connection. Inside his car, as the city lights reflected against the windshield, Alexander realized the truth he had been avoiding. For years, he had built walls of success and silence around himself. But one wrong pickup at an airport, one laugh from a woman who asked for nothing, had somehow found the door he had forgotten existed. And for the first time, he did not want to close it. Over the next few weeks, dinner turned into coffee, and coffee turned into long walks through the city after closing hours. Claire never asked for anything, and Alexander never mentioned who he really was. Their time together felt simple, two people sharing quiet moments that neither of them had known they were missing. Sometimes he would stop by the café just to order a drink he barely touched, staying long enough to see her smile. Other times he would drive her home, talking about books, art, and the small things that made ordinary life beautiful. One evening, as they sat by the riverwalk, watching the water shimmer under the streetlights, Claire said softly, You never talk much about your job. We out of this spanneration. Alexander looked at the skyline, then back at her. That is because most people only want to hear about the title, not the person behind it. She nodded. Well, I am not most people. He smiled. That is exactly why I am here. She laughed quietly, but there was warmth in her eyes. You are strange, you know that? A man with expensive taste who still likes street food. Maybe I just like good company, he said. They sat in silence for a while, the kind of silence that felt comfortable. Then Claire pulled out a small notebook from her bag, her old sketchbook. I am trying to design again, she said shyly. Nothing big, just ideas. I want to start a little shop online one day. He turned a page carefully, admiring the delicate lines of her designs. These are beautiful, Claire. You have real talent. Her cheeks flushed. Thank you. My mom used to say that kindness and art are the same thing, both make the world softer. Alexander looked at her, something unspoken forming behind his steady gaze. Your mother is a wise woman. The wind carried the scent of rain again. Claire leaned closer, wrapping her arms around herself. Without a word, he took off his jacket and placed it around her shoulders. Do you always do that? She teased. What? Give away your jacket to women you barely know. He chuckled. Only when they look cold. She smiled, holding the fabric tighter. Thank you, Alexander, for everything, for being kind. You make it easy, he said softly. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The city noise faded into a quiet hum, and in that stillness, they both felt something shift, something real, fragile, and undeniable. When he drove her home that night, Claire hesitated before getting out. I am glad you got in my car that day, she said. Alexander smiled. The best mistake I have ever made. She laughed softly, then closed the door and disappeared inside her building. He sat there for a moment, staring at the glow of the lobby lights, realizing how much her presence had changed him. She reminded him what it felt like to be grounded, to care, to listen, to see the world without numbers and contracts. And as the rain began to fall, Alexander made a quiet promise to himself. He would tell her the truth soon, who he was, what he did, and why he had kept it hidden. Because if there was one thing he had learned from her, it was that honesty, no matter how uncomfortable, was the only path to something real. That night, as Claire fell asleep clutching the sketchbook he had encouraged her to finish, she did not know that the man who had once seemed like a fleeting stranger was already rewriting the story of her life, one small act of kindness at a time. A week later, the truth came out in a way neither of them expected. Claire was finishing her shift at the café when the bell over the door chimed. Two women in sleek suits walked in, holding their phones up like they were recording something. One of them whispered, "That is her, the barista who has been seeing him." Before Claire could ask what was happening, she saw the newspaper they were holding. Her heart stopped. Across the front page was a photo of Alexander dressed in a tailored suit, shaking hands at a charity gala. The headline read, Orion CEO Alexander Reed seen with mystery woman. It teeting was. Comment. The photo beside it showed her, blurry but unmistakable, sitting with him at the Riverwalk. Claire's breath caught in her throat. The world around her seemed to slow. The man who had laughed with her over cheap coffee, who had listened to her talk about dreams, was not some quiet businessman. He was one of the most powerful CEOs in the country. The women were still whispering near the counter. Apparently, she had no idea who he was. Look at her. She works here. It is kind of sweet, actually. Sweet? It is pathetic. Claire ripped off her apron and rushed outside. The cold air hit her face as she walked toward the bus stop, phone trembling in her hand. Messages were already popping up from Jenna. Claire, is it true? The man from the airport? That is him? She could not answer. She just kept walking, the image of that newspaper burning in her mind. That evening, Alexander called. She ignored it. Then another call. And another. Finally, she answered, her voice shaking. Why did you not tell me? Claire, please. You lied to me, Alexander. All this time, you let me believe you were just normal. Do you know how stupid that makes me feel? I never wanted you to feel that way, he said, his voice tight with regret. I just wanted one part of my life to be real, without headlines or expectations. You gave me that. You should have trusted me enough to tell me the truth. Silence stretched across the line, heavy and raw. Then she said quietly, I cannot do this right now, and ended the call. Alexander stood alone in his office, city lights glittering below like 1,000 quiet witnesses. For the first time in years, he had no words, no plan, no strategy, just the hollow ache of losing something honest. The next morning, Claire walked into the cafe with her head down. Whispers followed her coworkers, pretending not to stare, customers murmuring under their breath. She focused on the coffee machine, forcing herself not to cry. Then the door opened. The hum of conversation stopped. Alexander walked in, still in his suit, but without the usual armor of control. He looked at her. No cameras, no entourage, just him. "Claire," he said softly, "please, 5 minutes." She froze, torn between anger and disbelief. "You should not be here." "I had to be," he said, "because I owe you the truth and an apology." He glanced at the people watching, then back at her. "You once told me your mother said kindness and art make the world softer. You were right. You made mine softer. I just forgot to tell you who I was because I was afraid you would see the headlines before you saw me. It is way sim—" The room stayed silent. Claire's hands trembled around the coffee cup she was holding. "Alexander," she whispered, "this is not the place." He nodded slowly. "Then tell me where. Tell me how to make it right." She looked at him, the man who had started as a stranger with a wrong name on a sign and turned into something she had not known she needed. Her heart warred with her pride. Finally, she said, "I need time." He accepted that with a quiet nod. "Take all the time you need. I will wait." As he left, the cafe buzz slowly returned. Claire leaned against the counter, her chest rising and falling with the weight of it all. That night, she opened her sketchbook again. She traced one of her unfinished designs, a small silver pendant shaped like an open heart. And for the first time since everything fell apart, she let herself cry. Outside, rain tapped against the glass again, the same rhythm it had the night they met. Somewhere across the city, Alexander stood at his office window, holding the bracelet she had once shown him, turning it over in his hand like a promise he refused to break. Both of them, under different roofs, were thinking the same thing: the wrong ride had become the right story. And even if it was broken now, neither wanted to let it end this way. Days passed, then weeks. The news about Alexander and the mystery woman faded from the headlines, replaced by new scandals and stories. But for Claire, the silence between them remained heavy. She threw herself into work, saving every dollar she could to help her mother, sketching late at night when the world was quiet. Yet, no matter how hard she tried, she could not stop thinking about him, his calm voice, his kindness, his eyes that always saw her first before her circumstances. Meanwhile, Alexander kept his promise. He did not call or send flowers. Instead, he found another way. One morning, when Claire arrived at the cafe, her manager handed her a letter. "This came for you," he said, looking curious. It was sealed in a simple white envelope. No logo, no perfume, just her name written neatly across the front. Inside was a short note: "Your sketches deserve to be seen. Visit the old studio on 12th Street at 5. No press, no tricks. Just trust me once more. A." Claire hesitated all day. Part of her told her not to go, that it might hurt again. But another part, the part that remembered his honesty in that cafe, told her to see for herself. At sunset, she arrived at the small brick studio. The door creaked as she stepped inside. The walls were lined with framed drawings, her designs. Every one of them. The sketches she had shown him, the ones from her old notebook, even the rough drafts she thought were lost. On the table in the center was a small box and another note. "You once said art and kindness make the world softer. I think the world needs both, and you are proof of that. This space is yours, Claire. Use it to create. Use it to dream again." Tears filled her eyes. She looked around, speechless, running her fingers over the edges of her framed work. Then she heard the door open behind her. Alexander stood there. No suit this time. Just a simple shirt and that same quiet look he always wore when he meant every word. "I did not want to interfere," he said. "I just wanted to give back what you gave me, the feeling of being real." The "I have ready to have said in tep with thin. In one of the pressed or bad a sign." Claire shook her head slowly, still overwhelmed. "You did all this?" He nodded. "You inspired it. You reminded me that leadership is not about money or power. It is about what we build for others." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Claire stepped closer. "You could have sent an assistant. You could have signed a check. Why come yourself?" Because I needed you to see that this was not an apology from a CEO, he said softly. It is from the man who got into the wrong car and met the right person. Her eyes met his, and for the first time since the truth came out, she saw no distance between them, just sincerity. Alexander reached into his pocket and placed something on the table, her bracelet, the one engraved with "Be kind anyway." "I think this belongs to you," he said. Claire looked at it, then at him. "Maybe it belongs to both of us now." The evening light fell through the windows, painting golden lines across the room. And for the first time in weeks, they both smiled. Not because everything was fixed, but because forgiveness had begun. A few months later, the small studio on 12th Street had transformed. The once empty walls were now filled with Claire's jewelry designs, delicate pieces that blended simplicity with warmth. The sign outside read, "Kind Line Studio Jewelry with a Heart." Customers came and went, drawn not just by the beauty of her work, but by the quiet kindness behind every design. Claire stood at the front counter one morning, arranging a new display when the door opened. She looked up and smiled. "You are early," she said. Alexander stepped inside, holding 2 cups of coffee. "Habit," he replied. "I like seeing this place before it gets busy." He handed her a cup, watching her with quiet pride. "You did all of this," he said. "You turned drawings into a real dream." Claire shook her head gently. "No, we did this. You gave me a chance to believe again." He smiled, setting his coffee down. "Maybe, but you were the one who made it real." For a moment, they stood there in comfortable silence, surrounded by soft morning light. The bracelet he had once returned to her now rested inside a glass case near the entrance, next to a small card that read, "Inspired by a stranger who taught me that kindness never bankrupts you." Claire noticed his gaze fall on it and said softly, "That line still feels true." "It always will," he answered. A gentle knock interrupted them. It was a delivery man carrying a large envelope. Claire signed for it and opened it curiously. Inside was a formal letter embossed with the logo of the Orion Foundation. Alexander tilted his head. "What is it?" "In he well filaments," she read quietly, then looked up, eyes shining. "They want to feature my studio in their community arts program. They want to fund workshops for young designers." He smiled slowly. "Then it seems your kindness is spreading further than either of us imagined." She laughed softly, emotion catching in her voice. "Do you realize this all started because you got into the wrong car?" He nodded. "I would call it the best mistake of my life." Their laughter faded into something softer. Alexander reached for her hand across the counter. "Claire, I know we began with misunderstanding, with secrets I regret, but every moment since has been the most honest part of my life. I do not want to lose that." She looked at him, her eyes steady. "Then do not." He took a breath, his tone quiet but certain. "I am not asking for perfection, only a chance to build something real together. Aden is not a grow pus, and Maya self or matter." For a heartbeat, time seemed to pause. Then Claire smiled, the kind of smile that held both forgiveness and promise. "Yes," she whispered. "Together." Outside, the morning light spilled across the street, touching the glass sign of her studio. Inside, they stood side by side, 2 people who had started from a simple act of kindness and ended up rewriting what love could mean. In the background, the camera of life faded slowly to the bracelet in the display case, its small engraving catching the light. "Be kind anyway." Because sometimes, the smallest act of kindness is not the end of a story. It is the beginning of everything that truly matters. A year later, spring sunlight poured through the tall windows of Kindline Studio. The place was busier than ever. Shelves gleamed with handcrafted pieces, each one named after small acts of courage and kindness. On one corner of the counter, a framed photo of Claire's mother smiled gently beside a vase of fresh lilies. Claire moved through the shop, greeting visitors with warmth that seemed to fill the room. The world outside might have known her now as Claire Johnson, founder of Kindline Designs. But inside, she was still the same woman who believed that small kindnesses could change lives. That afternoon, the doorbell chimed softly. She turned, and there he was. Alexander stepped inside, dressed simply in a white shirt and dark slacks. He carried no bodyguards, no briefcase, just a single white envelope. His smile was calm, but his eyes held the same spark that had drawn her in since the night of that mistaken ride. "Still working too much," he teased. "Always," she said, laughing softly. "And you?" Still pretending you are not the CEO of half the city? He chuckled. The nutting do Efren. She leaned against the counter, folding her arms. So, what brings you here, Mr. Reed? He took a slow breath and held up the envelope. Something I have been meaning to ask. She raised an eyebrow. Is that business or personal? Both, he said. He handed her the envelope. Inside was a simple card, no glitter, no formality, just handwritten words that made her breath catch. I found the right car. I found the right woman. Will you marry me? Claire looked up, speechless. For a long moment, the room was still except for the hum of soft music playing from the radio. Alexander reached into his pocket and took out a small velvet box. Inside was a ring, delicate and beautiful, shaped like the same open heart she had once sketched in her notebook. I wanted to design this together, he said quietly, but it turns out it has always been yours. Tears welled in her eyes. You remember that drawing? I remember everything about you, Claire, he said. You reminded me what matters. Not wealth, not headlines, not power, just truth, kindness, and love that shows up every day. For a moment, she could not speak. She set the card down and reached across the counter, taking his hand. Yes, she whispered. I will. Outside, sunlight spilled over them through the glass window. The customers in the shop clapped softly, a few even tearing up. Claire laughed through her tears, and Alexander slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. He smiled, his voice warm. Looks like fate finally got one thing right. She laughed, shaking her head. No, fate just needed a little kindness to guide it. They stood together as the light danced across the room, touching the framed bracelet in the corner case, the one engraved with, "Be kind anyway." That bracelet had started it all. A wrong pickup, a stranger's kindness, a story that turned mistake into miracle. And as the camera of life faded to the golden light filling the studio, her voice carried softly in the air. Sometimes the wrong beginning can lead to the right forever. And sometimes all it takes to change a life is a little kindness. The scene lingered on their hands, her ring catching the light, his fingers intertwined with hers before everything faded to white. The end.